For 13 long years, Lyra lived inside a cold and silent prison. Her cell was made of metal walls, damp with shadows, and the air was heavy with the smell of rust. Every day felt the same. Every night stretched into forever, and hope had long been buried inside her heart. She was a prisoner of the alien Baron, a cruel ruler known for his hunger for power and his love of breaking spirits. The Baron kept many slaves, but Lyra was different. She was once free, once a proud daughter of her people, before the Baron's soldiers captured her during a raid. That night of fire and screams never left her mind. She remembered how the sky burned as alien ships descended, and how chains were forced onto her wrists. Since then, her life had been reduced to this dark cage. Her only light came from a small crack in the ceiling where a single beam of stars shone down. Lyra would stare at it for hours, whispering silent prayers to the universe, wishing someone might hear her voice. But no answer ever came, only the sound of guards laughing in the hallways or the echo of boots marching past her door. The Baron made sure she knew her place. He visited her sometimes, not to speak, but to remind her she was nothing more than property. His red eyes glowed in the darkness as he mocked her weakness. It was his favorite game, to watch her break. Yet even after 13 years, a small flame survived inside her. It was faint, hidden deep within her chest, but it refused to die. She dreamed of freedom, even when her body was weak and her chains were heavy. She dreamed of the stars beyond the fortress walls. And she dreamed of someone, anyone, who might care enough to set her free. One night, everything changed. The fortress was silent as usual, the halls filled with shadows. Lyra lay on the cold floor, her body thin and fragile, when she heard something strange. It was not the heavy boots of guards, not the cruel laugh of the Baron. It was lighter, softer, almost like someone trying not to be heard. Her heart raced. For years she had only heard familiar sounds, the same cruel pattern of life. But this sound was new, dangerous, and yet filled with a strange kind of hope. She crawled closer to the bars of her cell, her weak hands gripping the cold iron. Through the dark hallway, she saw movement, a shadow that did not belong to the Baron's men. The figure was tall, wearing dark armor, but the shape was different. Not alien, not monstrous, but something else. Her breath caught. Could it be real, or was her mind playing tricks after so many years? The figure stepped closer, and under the dim light, she saw his face. It was not like the Baron's twisted features, not like the cruel guards who carried whips. This face was human. Sharp eyes, strong jaw, determination carved into his expression. He looked around carefully, holding a weapon unlike any she had seen. He moved with purpose, like a hunter stalking prey. Lyra could not stop staring. She had heard whispers about humans before, rumors traded between prisoners in the past. They were said to be wild, fearless, and free. But she never thought she would see one here, in the heart of the Baron's fortress. The human stopped in front of her cell, his eyes falling on her thin form. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. His gaze softened, as if he saw not a prisoner, but a person. And for the first time in 13 years, Lyra felt seen. The man placed a finger over his lips, signaling silence. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the guards would hear it. She pressed herself closer to the bars, whispering with a voice so weak it was almost a breath. "Who are you?" The man leaned closer, his voice steady but low. "My name is James. I am here for something else, but I will not leave you behind." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever said those words to her. For 13 years, she had been forgotten, unseen, unloved. And now, in the darkness, a human had spoken a promise. Her chest ached with hope, a dangerous hope she had not dared to feel in so long. But hope was also fear. If the Baron discovered this, the punishment would be worse than death. Still, she could not let go of James's words. They wrapped around her heart like light breaking through endless night. In that moment, she realized her story was no longer just about surviving. Something had changed, something had begun. And the universe, silent for 13 years, finally answered. James stood in the shadows of the Baron's fortress, his heart steady but his mind alert. He had come here for another reason, a secret mission that had nothing to do with prisoners. But when he saw Lyra's face behind the bars, everything changed. Her hollow eyes, her fragile body, her silent cry for help. It all struck him harder than any weapon ever could. For a moment, he almost looked away. It would be easier to focus on his mission, to escape unnoticed, to leave this place before the Baron's guards discovered him. But James was human, and humans were not built to walk away from suffering. Not when someone's life was hanging by a thread. He stepped closer to the bars, his voice low and calm. "You've been here too long," he whispered, his eyes never leaving hers. Lyra clutched the cold metal, her weak fingers trembling. Her voice cracked like old paper, but her words carried years of pain. 13 years, she breathed. 13 years in chains. James clenched his jaw, anger burning inside him. He had heard stories about the Baron's cruelty, but seeing it with his own eyes filled him with rage. No one should suffer like this. No one should be forgotten like this. He scanned the hallway, listening for the sound of guards, before leaning closer. "I will come back for you," he said firmly. "I swear it." Lyra's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to those words as if they were water in a desert. But years of broken hope had taught her that promises were dangerous. And yet, when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she had not seen in anyone for so long: truth. James meant every word. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the distance. Harsh voices shouted orders in the alien tongue. James pressed a finger to his lips again, his body tense like a coiled spring. He melted back into the shadows, disappearing just before the guards turned the corner. Lyra held her breath as two armored guards stomped past. Their heavy boots rattled the metal floor, their cruel laughter filling the hallway. They glanced into her cell, sneering as they always did, but saw nothing unusual. Satisfied, they moved on, leaving the silence behind them once more. Her heart still raced. Had she imagined him? Had the years finally broken her mind? But no, she could still feel the warmth of his words in the air. A human had stood before her, and he had promised freedom. Later that night, James returned, moving with the silence of a shadow. He crouched beside her cell, working quickly with strange human tools. Sparks flew as he studied the lock, his hands steady and skilled. Lyra watched him, torn between fear and awe. Every sound felt too loud. Every spark felt like a signal that would bring the guards running. "Why?" she whispered, unable to stop herself. "Why risk yourself for me?" James didn't look up, his focus fixed on the lock. "Because no one deserves this," he answered simply. "Because I can." His words were like a blade cutting through the darkness, sharp and unshakable. The lock clicked, the sound small but powerful. The door creaked open, and for the first time in 13 years, Lyra's cell was no longer sealed. Her legs trembled as she tried to stand, her body weak from years of neglect. James reached out, his strong hand steadying her. "Lean on me," he said. "We don't have much time." Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. Each step was agony, but each step was also freedom. They moved down the hallway, James leading with purpose, Lyra clinging to him as though he were the only thing keeping her alive. The fortress was quiet, but danger hung in the air like smoke before fire. Every corner could hide a patrol, every shadow could be death. But James didn't falter, his eyes sharp, his weapon ready. Lyra felt fear and hope fight inside her chest. She had dreamed of freedom for so long, but now, walking these forbidden halls, it felt both real and impossible. Behind them, the silence broke. An alarm screamed through the fortress, red lights flashing across the metal walls. Lyra's heart froze. Had they been discovered already? James pulled her close, his voice firm and unshaken. "Stay with me," he said. "No matter what happens, stay with me." For the first time in 13 years, Lyra was outside her cell. For the first time, she was running toward the unknown. And for the first time, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, freedom was within reach. The alarm echoed through the fortress, its shrill cry bouncing off the metal walls like a scream that could not be silenced. Red warning lights flashed above, painting Lyra's pale face in streaks of crimson. Her breath came fast, her legs weak, but she clung to James as if the strength in his stride could carry her forward. James moved with precision, his weapon drawn, his eyes scanning every shadow. He had been in dangerous missions before, but this was different. This time he was not alone. This time someone's life depended on him completely. They ducked into a narrow corridor, James pressing Lyra against the wall, his body shielding her from view. Two guards ran past, their voices harsh, their armor clanging with each step. James held his breath, his finger steady on the trigger of his weapon. But the guards rushed by without looking, chasing the echo of the alarm toward the outer hangar. Only when their footsteps faded did James whisper, "We have minutes, maybe less, before the whole fortress knows." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding so hard she thought the guards might hear it. Her chain still clinked with every movement, the metal biting into her wrists and ankles. James noticed and grimaced. He knelt quickly, pulling out a small tool from his belt. A bright spark hissed as the chains broke free, falling onto the cold floor. For the first time in 13 years, her arms were unbound. She touched her wrists in disbelief, her skin raw but free. "Better," James said with a quick nod. "Now you can run." Run. The word felt strange to her, like a dream-given voice. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to move, one step after another. James guided her through a maze of tunnels, his memory sharp. He had studied the fortress layout for his mission, but now every path led to a greater risk. Alarms continued to blare. Voices shouting orders in the alien tongue grew louder. Somewhere above, heavy doors slammed shut, sealing exits. They were trapping the intruder, trapping James, and now trapping her. At the next corner, James stopped suddenly, raising his hand. 3 guards stood ahead, weapons drawn, blocking the hallway. Their alien eyes glowed with cruelty as they spotted Lyra and James. One barked an order, lifting a blaster. James reacted first, firing in a swift arc, the shots sharp and deadly. 2 guards fell instantly, sparks flying from their armor. The third lunged forward, swinging a blade. James met him head-on, their weapons clashing. The fight was quick, brutal, but James ended it with precision, leaving the alien crumpled on the floor. Lyra's eyes widened, her chest tight. She had seen death before, but this was different. This was not cruelty, not slow torture, not the Baron's twisted games. This was survival. This was freedom being fought for in every strike. James turned to her, his face set with focus. "We keep moving," he said. "The hangar is close." He didn't say what they both knew, that the Baron himself might already be on his way. They moved again, faster now, Lyra pushing her body harder than she thought possible. Every step was pain, every breath burned her lungs, but she would not stop. Not after 13 years of waiting. Not when freedom was this close. Another hallway, another checkpoint. This time James used a small device, pressing it against a control panel. The screen glitched, sparks flying, and the door slid open with a hiss. "Human tech," James muttered with a half-smile. "They never see it coming." Inside was a narrow maintenance tunnel, dim and damp. The ceiling dripped with condensation, the floor slick. It smelled of oil and smoke. But to Lyra, it was the sweetest place she had ever stepped into. Because it was a path forward, a path out. James let her go first, his weapon ready. Behind them, the fortress shook with the sound of marching boots. The Baron's forces were closing in. "Faster," James urged, his voice steady even as tension tightened every muscle. Lyra crawled through the tight space, her fingers scraping against the metal. Every sound echoed, every movement felt too loud. But they reached the other end, and James pushed the hatch open. Cool air rushed in. For the first time in years, Lyra felt wind against her skin. It was faint, mixed with the smoke of ships and engines, but it was real. Her eyes filled with tears as she stepped into the hangar's edge. Rows of alien ships gleamed under the red lights, guards shouting orders as alarms blared. Somewhere among them, James's stolen craft waited, their only chance. But between them and freedom was chaos. Dozens of guards, weapons raised, searching. James's jaw tightened, his grip on his weapon firm. He glanced at Lyra, his voice low but fierce. "This is it. We either make it out now, or we die here." And for the first time in 13 years, Lyra did not feel like a prisoner anymore. She felt like someone about to fight for her own life. The hangar roared with chaos, alarms screaming, engines firing, soldiers shouting orders. Red lights flashed against the silver hulls of ships, shadows stretching across the floor like hungry claws. James pulled Lyra close against the wall, his eyes scanning for a path. Guards patrolled in groups, weapons drawn, searching for the intruder that had dared to defy the Baron. Lyra's heart raced as she clung to James's arm, her body weak but her spirit burning. She had never seen the hangar before, never imagined the scale of the Baron's power. Rows of alien fighters rested like sleeping predators, each one armed with deadly weapons. And somewhere among them, hidden in the shadows, was the human ship James had come in. "Stay low," James whispered, his voice calm but firm. He crouched, guiding her through a narrow gap between two massive fuel tanks. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of oil. Every step echoed in her ears. Every breath felt too loud. Lyra's chains were gone, but the weight of fear still clung to her. She forced herself to move, because James's grip was steady, because his voice gave her courage. A shout rang out, sharp and cruel. Two guards spotted them, raising their weapons. James reacted instantly, pulling Lyra behind cover, his blaster firing in quick bursts. The guards fell, sparks flying from their armor, their screams drowned out by the wail of the alarm. But their fall brought more footsteps pounding against the floor, more voices calling out. "There!" someone roared. Bolts of energy seared past, scorching the walls, sending showers of sparks raining down. James pulled Lyra through another row of ships, weaving through shadows. His movements were sharp, controlled, every action driven by survival. Lyra stumbled but kept going, her body trembling but refusing to stop. She had dreamed of freedom for so long, and now the dream was alive. She would not let it slip away. Ahead, James spotted the small craft, its black frame tucked into the far corner of the hangar. It looked humble compared to the Baron's ships, but to Lyra it was a promise. A promise of stars, of open skies, of a life beyond these walls. But between them and that ship stood a squad of guards, armed and waiting. Their eyes glowed red as they raised their weapons in unison. James tightened his jaw. He couldn't take them all in a straight fight, not while protecting Lyra. His eyes darted to the fuel tanks above, lines of pipes running like veins along the ceiling. An idea sparked, dangerous but their only chance. He turned to Lyra, his voice low and quick. "When I tell you, run to the ship and don't stop, no matter what." She nodded, fear burning in her chest, but trust stronger than fear. James aimed high, firing at the pipes. A deafening roar filled the hangar as fuel spilled and ignited. Flames burst across the ceiling, smoke rolling down in waves. The guards shouted in panic, their formation breaking. "Now!" James shouted, pulling Lyra forward. They ran, weaving through smoke and fire, bolts of energy flashing past. Lyra's lungs burned, her legs threatened to give out, but she kept going. The ship grew closer, every step of victory, every heartbeat of battle. James fired behind them, covering their retreat, his movements sharp and relentless. They reached the ship, James slamming his hand against the hatch. It hissed open, the ramp lowering with a groan. Lyra stumbled inside, collapsing onto the floor, her chest heaving. James followed, hitting controls on the panel. But before the hatch could close, a shadow loomed. The Baron's guards were not finished. A group charged, their roars shaking the hangar. James fired again, dropping 2, 3, but more came. He shouted, "Hold on," as he slammed the hatch shut. The ship's engines roared to life, trembling under his command. Through the viewport, Lyra saw the guards swarming, pounding against the hull, firing at the glass. Her body shook with terror, but James stood tall at the controls. His voice steady, his hands precise. "We're not free yet," he said. "The hardest part is still ahead." The ship lifted from the hangar floor, fire and smoke curling around it. The Baron's fortress shuddered as alarms grew louder, as defenses powered up. Outside, enemy fighters began to rise, their wings glowing with deadly light. Lyra's heart froze. Escape had only just begun, and the Baron's wrath was about to descend upon them. The ship shook as it rose from the hangar, smoke curling past the windows, alarms echoing behind them. Lyra clutched the seat, her knuckles white, her heart racing faster than the engine's roar. James sat at the controls, his eyes sharp, his movements steady. Every lever he pulled, every button he pressed was filled with urgency, with precision born of survival. But before the ship could break free, a shadow moved across the viewport. It was massive, dark, and heavy with menace. The alien Baron's command cruiser hovered above, blocking the exit like a predator guarding its prey. Its hull gleamed with cruel symbols, its cannons glowing with deadly energy. The voice of the Baron boomed through the comms, cold and mocking. "Do you think you can steal from me? Human, do you think you can take what is mine?" Lyra froze, her breath caught in her chest. The sound of his voice was enough to drag her back into the nightmare of 13 years. She could see his eyes in her memory, burning red, always watching, always reminding her she was nothing. Now he was here, real and furious. James didn't flinch. His voice was calm, his jaw tight. "She's not yours," he said. "Not anymore." The Baron's laugh shook the comms, cruel and sharp. "You are brave for a human, but bravery without power is useless. Give her back, and I may let you crawl away alive." Lyra's heart trembled. Every instinct screamed to surrender, to avoid the Baron's wrath. But then she looked at James. He was only one man, only human, yet he stood against a monster that had enslaved worlds. His defiance was a fire, and that fire gave her strength. The Baron's ship moved, its cannons charging, red light building into a blinding glow. The fortress walls echoed with energy, the hangar below trembling with force. James gripped the controls, his eyes locked on the enemy. He knew they couldn't outgun the Baron, not head-on. But humans didn't always fight with power, they fought with wit. The Baron's voice thundered again. "You cannot run. Human, the stars themselves will close to deny you. She belongs to me." Lyra's chest tightened, tears threatening her eyes, but James spoke first. "She belongs to no one." With a sudden move, James slammed the controls, spinning the ship into a sharp dive. Energy bolts shot past, scorching space where they had been only moments before. The craft shuddered, alarms inside screaming, but James's hands were steady. He pulled the ship low, weaving between defense towers, using the fortress itself as cover. The Baron roared in fury, his voice crackling through the comms. "Coward, you cannot hide. You cannot escape me." More fighters launched from the fortress, their engines howling, their weapons primed. Lyra's fear grew as she saw them swarm like a pack of predators closing in. James's voice cut through her fear, calm and clear. "Hold on, this isn't over yet." He twisted the ship, diving through narrow gaps, rolling past towers. Each move was reckless, impossible, yet perfect. Lyra clung to her seat, her breath stolen by the speed. The human ship was smaller, weaker, but it was faster, and James flew it like it was a part of him. Still, the Baron's cruiser loomed above, unshaken, relentless. Its shadow spread across the battlefield like a curse. Its weapons powered up again, preparing to unleash a storm that no small ship could survive. James's eyes narrowed. He whispered under his breath, "One chance." His fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power, overloading systems. The ship groaned in protest, warning lights flashing, but James ignored them. He aimed straight for the cruiser, not away from it. Lyra gasped, "What are you doing?" His answer was simple, steady, showing him what humans do when we're cornered. The Baron's laughter filled the air, certain of victory. He raised his hand on the screen, ready to give the final command. But in that moment, something shifted in Lyra. 13 years of chains, of silence, of fear, all of it burned away. She leaned forward, her voice strong for the first time. "You will not take me again." The Baron's smile faded, just for a heartbeat. James fired, not at the cruiser's cannons, not at its thick armor, but at the exposed fuel lines along the hangar walls below. The explosion tore through the base, fire and smoke rushing upward. The blast threw the Baron's cruiser off balance, its shields flickering, its power surging chaotically. "Now," James growled, pulling the ship into a climb. They shot upward, past the weakened cruiser, through fire and debris. Lyra held her breath as stars opened before them, bright and endless. The Baron's voice roared behind them, filled with fury, filled with rage. "This isn't the end. Human, she will be mine again." But the words faded as distance grew. The fortress became smaller, the stars became closer. And for the first time in 13 years, Lyra was no longer trapped beneath the Baron's shadow. The stars stretched wide before them, endless and bright, but freedom was not yet theirs. Behind them, the Baron's cruiser roared back to life, its weapons glowing with fury, its fighters swarming like a nest of hornets. The human ship trembled under the strain, warning lights flashing red across the console. James gripped the controls, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the void ahead. "They won't let us go easily," he muttered. Lyra sat beside him, her body still weak, but her spirit burning brighter than ever. She looked at the endless stars, her heart swelling with both fear and hope. For 13 years she had dreamed of this view, and now it was here, so close, so fragile. A wave of enemy fighters closed in, their engines howling, their weapons flashing deadly bolts of light. James twisted the ship sharply, weaving through fire that lit the darkness. Bolts slammed against their hull, shaking the ship, sparks flying from the panels. Lyra gripped the seat, her voice trembling. "We can't fight them all." James's voice was calm, steady like a mountain in a storm. "We don't need to fight them all. We just need to survive long enough." The Baron's voice crackled over the comms, filled with venom. "You cannot run. Human, every star you reach will belong to me. Every breath she takes belongs to me." Lyra flinched, but James's hand reached across the console, steadying hers. "He doesn't own you," he said firmly. "Not anymore." The enemy fighters closed in tighter, firing in deadly arcs. James rolled the ship, diving low, then climbing high, every move reckless but precise. The smaller human craft darted between blasts, slipping through gaps too narrow for the heavier ships. Still, the damage grew, smoke filling the cabin, systems flashing warnings. The engines screamed as James pushed them beyond their limits. "Power's failing," Lyra whispered, fear clutching her chest. James's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll make the power we need." He rerouted systems, shutting down non-essential functions, diverting everything to shields and engines. Lights dimmed, panels flickered, but the ship surged forward with renewed speed. The Baron's cruiser loomed ahead, its cannons glowing brighter, preparing a final strike. James's voice dropped, steady and grim. "This is it. We either break past him now, or we don't leave at all." Lyra's throat tightened, the weight of his words sinking deep. But when she looked at him, she saw no fear, only fire. And for the first time, she felt that same fire inside her. The Baron's face appeared on the comms, his red eyes burning. "You are nothing, human, one fragile spark in the dark. I will crush you, and she will kneel again." Lyra stood, her body shaking but her voice strong. "No," she said, her eyes locked on the screen. "I will never kneel again." The Baron's smile faltered, just for a breath. James seized the moment, diving the ship straight toward the cruiser. Bolts of energy screamed past, grazing their hull, fire sparking across the controls. Lyra nearly fell, but James's voice anchored her. "Hold on." At the last moment, James pulled the ship upward, skimming across the surface of the cruiser. Enemy fire blasted from below, striking their own defenses as they tried to hit him. Explosions rippled across the massive hull, smoke and fire tearing through its shields. The Baron roared in fury, his ship shaking under the damage. But James wasn't finished. He locked onto a weak point, a glowing cluster of power conduits exposed during the chaos. "Now," he muttered and fired. The shot struck true, detonating in a blaze that rocked the cruiser. Its engines sputtered, its weapons faltered, and for the first time, the mighty Baron's ship reeled in pain. The smaller fighters broke formation, confusion spreading through their ranks. James didn't waste the moment. "Punching through," he growled, slamming the controls forward. The human craft roared past the broken line, surging into the open void. Lyra's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, tears streaming down her face. They were not safe yet, but the stars stretched open before them, free and vast. The comm crackled again, the Baron's voice dripping with rage. "This is not over. Human, she will always belong to me." But Lyra shook her head, her voice fierce. "I belong to no one." The transmission cut, leaving only the hum of their battered ship. James exhaled, his hands steady on the controls. They were alive, they were free, for now. But freedom always had a price. And James knew the Baron would never stop hunting them. Still, when he looked at Lyra, he saw more than fear. He saw strength, he saw defiance, he saw someone who had survived the impossible. And in that moment, he knew, no matter the cost, he would never let her fall back into chains. The stars stretched before them, endless and untouched, a sea of light that promised both danger and hope. The ship was battered, smoke drifting from cracked panels, the engines groaning with every pulse, but it was flying. James kept his hands steady on the controls, guiding the small craft away from the Baron's reach. Lyra sat beside him, her eyes wide, her chest still rising in uneven breaths. For the first time in 13 years, she was no longer inside a cage. No walls pressed in on her, no chains weighed down her wrists, no cruel laughter echoed in her ears. The silence of space wrapped around her, not as a prison, but as freedom. Her eyes filled with tears, but these tears were different, warm and alive. James glanced at her, his face smeared with soot, his hair damp with sweat, but his eyes calm. "You're safe now," he said softly. Lyra looked at him, her voice breaking with disbelief. "Am I?" James nodded once, firm and sure. "You're not his prisoner anymore, not as long as I breathe." The words struck her heart like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For years she had been nothing but property, but now, a human had looked at her and seen a person. Not a slave, not a prize, not a possession, just her. And that truth was more powerful than any chain. The ship drifted farther into the void, the Baron's fortress now a faint shadow behind them. But Lyra knew he would not stop. His anger would burn across the stars until he found them again. Still, fear no longer controlled her, because now she was not alone. James checked the systems, his brow furrowed at the damage. "We need repairs, fuel, food," he muttered. But then he allowed himself a small smile. "First, we need distance. The farther we are from his shadow, the better." Lyra leaned back, her body trembling from exhaustion, her voice quiet. "I don't know how to live free anymore." James turned to her, his voice gentle but strong. "Then we'll learn together." Her lips parted, surprise flashing in her eyes. Together, such a simple word, but one she had not heard in so long. The Baron had stolen her years, her dignity, her voice. But James had given her something greater than escape. He had given her a future. As the ship slipped into the dark, the stars grew brighter. Each point of light a possibility, a world, a chance. Lyra pressed her hand against the viewport, staring at the infinity she had once only dreamed of. It felt unreal, it felt impossible, yet it was here, right in front of her. James leaned back in his chair, his voice tired but steady. "You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore." Lyra turned to him, her eyes glistening. "Why did you save me?" she whispered. James met her gaze, his words simple. "Because humans don't turn away, because you deserved better." Her heart ached, not with pain, but with something new. Hope, fragile yet alive, grew inside her. She realized that freedom was not just the absence of chains. It was the presence of someone who would fight for you, who would stand beside you. And in James, she had found that. The ship cut deeper into the void, leaving fire and shadows behind. The Baron's voice no longer reached them. His red eyes no longer haunted the air. For the first time, Lyra felt her chest rise without fear, her breath her own. She whispered to herself, almost too soft to hear, "I am free." James heard it, and his lips curved into a small, tired smile. "Yes," he said, his voice steady, "you are." And as the stars opened wider, a new dawn began, not in the sky, but in her heart. A dawn that no Baron, no prison, no shadow could ever take away again.